So happy Saturday. And here we are going to put a front wheel bearing, whatever you want to call this little assembly, in this 2016 SS Camaro. This seems to be a common thing with these, but they all got something that you got to do to them repeatedly. And this is the first round on this one, and from the mileage estimates I've received from other people, this one's held up pretty well. So let's get started. So the first thing you got to do is take these drive pins out. You get the pins out, they'll let you pull the pads out. And you want to remember which one goes in the top and which one goes in the bottom. Even though these are factory installed, they still work just like any other pair of Brimbos if you've ever messed with them. And you got to get past this spring. There's the top one. And it's showing no appreciable wear, so we'll just set it back there. And then the same thing down here, just kind of push the spring back. Now the bottom one tends to have a little more road crud on it usually. So you may have to twist it through the hole, and I'm having to do that on this one. So you get more gunk buildup up here because it's at the bottom of the water runoff and whatever else you get. The little spinnies are still on them. That's a good thing. And again, no appreciable wear. So we'll put this one over here. Now you can usually just get it pads a good pull, and you'll feel the spring come up. And when it does, you can usually walk them right out. And there comes the outside one. Springs out. Remember which way it was in. It's got plenty of pad left, at least on the outside pad. Probably in another 10 or 15,000 miles, we'll have to do something about that. There we go. And they are worn evenly. So I'm going to take these and lay them on top of each other and set them over here on the jack. So we put them back in the same place they were in. Now I got to go back here and take these two big bolts out. That'll let me get the caliper off and pop the rotor off. I'm going to hang the caliper up here off the strut mount. And we'll go see about getting the 3 bolts out and getting the bearing off. And this one has no play in it, but it is making a noise. So now I got them broke loose. Viva the giant breaker bar. I got to take these 2 big bolts out. And as you can see, I got a rope holding the caliper so if it comes loose, it doesn't snatch down on the wheel sensor or the brake line. But I think the wheel sensor is actually down behind the hub on this because I can't really see it. And again, you want to keep your bolts. It's just a good practice to put the bolt back in the same hole it come out of. As you can see, it might show up on the film. I don't know. This one had blue Loctite on it. So I'll be sure to put blue Loctite back on it. All right. So there's that one. And now the bigger now is get these little bolts back here out. And when we take those out, then the spindle will come off. Do that hub bearing because this thing doesn't really have a spindle. Before we do that, you gotta take this little bolt right here out. Okay, so when you get your ratchet in here, the rotor's gonna turn. Now I've already broken this one loose. Let's snug it back up a little bit for talking's sake here. All right, it's gonna turn rather than break loose. This is where your drift pin comes in, or a nice flat bladed screwdriver. You can go ahead and give yourself some leverage. And this is just a little T30 torque screw here. And as you can see, the rotors are already moving around, which is a good sign. That means the bearing hasn't gotten hot. We're going to want to put that back with a dot of Loctite. Don't want to scratch your rotor. Now I had to go over to the other side and turn the wheel all the way to the right to get access to get in here. But from this angle, you can see it a little better. I don't have as much sun glare. But this top one, I'm going to have to do something. I'll have to come up from the back over there to get that one. And these things are probably about 80 pounds, I would say. But now that I got it turning, I'm just going to switch back to a 3/8 ratchet. Working one-handed and holding the camera here again. And since we're going back with a new spindle, or new hub assembly, I don't think it's going to matter where the bolt goes. So I'll just set them over here. And as you can see, it's got red Loctite on it. And they're coming out pretty nicely so far, but I do got that one last one to go. That's not in the best of locations. What I need is an offset 15mm wrench, which I have, but of course I don't have it with me. So it's one of those things I don't need very often. But I guess now that this one's part of the fleet, I need to be having it with me. I'm up on the one behind the strut now. I can't get the 1/2-inch drive equipment in there, so I'm having to use this little 3/8. And I really need a cheater bar on it. Oh, there we go. So let me cut and use 2 hands here. You got to be mindful of the wheel sensor there, ABS sensor. And we're out. It's not too bad. It's not seized up. I've heard of some of these getting overheated and seizing, and I was really hoping we wouldn't have that problem, and we don't. So I just got a lot of crud in there. So I got to get this a good cleaning, and then we'll get it back together. So this is a very important step on these. Before you put this new bearing in, you want to put some of this high temperature brake lubricant. This is the Wagner brand, the GM high temp. Any of those will work. You don't want to put it in dry because 2 reasons. One, if the bearing ever seizes and runs hot, it's going to seize to the spindle here or the bracket, and you're going to need a new bracket because it's going to tear it up getting it out and it won't go back in straight. Also, it helps transfer heat from the bearing into the spindle. Like dielectric grease helps keep static electricity and moisture out of your electronics. This helps transfer heat and cut down on seizing. Make sure you do this step. So it's just silicone high temperature grease, and I'm gonna put a nice layer of it all over in here. And if a little goes out the back, that's not a bad thing, but you don't want to get a whole bunch because then it could possibly get onto your brake surfaces. But this little catch pan back here will keep most of that from happening. You want to give it a nice coating. Just put a little bit out here, just kind of dot it sporadically because it'll squish when you tighten up. And then I'm also going to put a little bit around the back side of this, actually in this groove right here. All right. I'm gonna put some Loctite on these, but I just want to make sure I got the holes lined up. There we go. And I'll give this one a couple of threads just to hold it, and go get some Loctite. Okay, so here's the red Loctite, and I'm gonna put a little dab of that on each one of these bolts holding the hub. All right, and then the same thing here on this one. Another little shot of red Loctite. Remember, Loctite doesn't harden up until you run it in, because it's an anaerobic glue, so it dries without air. So as long as you don't let it go airless, it doesn't dry. So we start getting close, just push up on the spindle here. Loctite also does a pretty good job of acting like a lubricant. And now the spindle's going into place. Now we're not going to snug that completely up. We're going to go ahead and run up the next one. Now this is one of those places I think I would actually like an air ratchet. But I try to do things the way most of us would have to do if we weren't well equipped or just had basic hand tools. And I think it adds a little more and helps build confidence in everybody when they realize what they can do with their hands and some simple tools. All right, so here we go, going for the 80 foot-pounds. There's one. Set this down for a second so I don't hit this sensor line here. There's two. And there's three. So the bearing's technically replaced. I'm gonna put it back together in the same order. But one thing I would check, one of these holes is threaded, it's this one, and one of these holes is not threaded. So keep that in mind when you put your rotor on so you don't have to pull it on and off twice. And don't forget to put your dust shield back, which is something that people tend to forget for some reason, and I myself have done it. So here we are working on the other side of the Camaro. The GoPro ran out about the time I finished last time, so I'll show the reassembly from the opposite side of the car. But you know, it works the same from one side to the other. So I won't bore you with taking it all apart again. I'll go ahead and get this broke down and get this hub bearing in, and then we'll see what we can do about filming the finish up on it. So here we are back about where the battery died in GoPro last time. Got the new hub in. Don't forget to put the dust cover back on, the dust shield, the garbage deflector, various names for this thing. They went through a lot of effort on these cars to cool the brakes on them. They got the air comes in, they got a little scoop here to direct it over and got fins to catch it. Put it back. It doesn't seem like much if you're just driving it, but it does help your brakes last longer. Anytime you can take heat away from a product or an item on a mechanical device, it will last longer. It improves its life. So when you go to put the rotor back on, notice that in these hubs, one of these holes is not threaded and one hole is. So make sure you line your hole up in your rotor with the threaded one so you don't have to do that twice. Now we're not putting brakes on this one this time. Probably in about 10,000 miles we're going to need to. And I'm looking at this rotor to see where the screw was before, which was right there. I'm going to put a little dot of Loctite. This looks like it had blue on it or green. So I'm just going to put a small little dot of it. So there we go. Rotor's on and snug. And it's just a little tiny, like 10 or 12 32 screw. You don't want to pull that too tight. You can break it off. So what I got to do now is turn this thing back to the right, and I don't know if I can do it with the rotor. No, I'm going to have to go use the tire. I got to turn it back this way so I can get in behind here to put the caliper back on. And I usually like to get this caliper back in place and get the top bolt in it. And I know it's a little hard to see down in here. Get the top bolt in it. Then go ahead and Loctite my bottom bolt. Get it in. And started a couple of threads. Then pull this one back out and Loctite it. That way you're protecting the brake hose. As they get older, that'll become more important. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these up. Torque them up. Okay, so the bolts are back in and it's torqued. So what I got to do now is get the brake pads back in. Let's see if they're going to go. And you can kind of cheat the pistons a little bit with the pads themselves. And I tend to put these right back where they were, same position. This is the outside one. There we go. Okay, so let's put the back one back in. Sometimes you can just push the pistons with the pad on these and they'll go head in. Now this was the top pin. I'm going to go ahead and get it in its hole. This was the bottom pin. Get it in its hole. This is still oriented. The spring here is still oriented in the direction it was originally in. We got to weasel it in amongst the pads here. Push your springs down with your thumb or a screwdriver or whatever you have handy. You may have to wiggle the pads around a little bit. There, that gets us through to the other side of the caliper here. Then we can okay, and when you see the little end come out completely over here, you know you're in all the way. There. Make sure your spring's centered. And that caliper's back on. So we're ready to put the wheel on and button it up. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it helpful, informative, at least entertaining. As always, practice your skills or learn a new one. Either way, turn it into craftsmanship. You never know how far they'll take you. So until next time, this has been Fab Race Mod Repeat. Have a great day.